The battle occurred a long time ago, and there are very, very few remnants that you can see around here of a battle. In fact, if you visit Olustee today, it's a park.
Every year, tens of thousands of Americans take part in some sort of Civil War reenactment. Florida hosts over 30 such events annually, including the Battle of Olustee, which brings together thousands of participants and spectators each February in a piney woods near Lake City. Besides staging mock battles, reenactors spend the weekend camping, socializing, and dressing up in varying degrees of authenticity. Some see reenacting as a way to teach others about the war, or at least certain aspects of it.
It was hardcore, and I want people to see what it was really like. I like to teach.
And I've definitely been doing my research on it. And this, again, it shows me how they lived, how they fought.
Others look for insights into the experiences of their own families.
We both have ancestors that fought in the Civil War, and we both have ancestors that fought in the Revolutionary War.
Really? So
we just feel like we're honoring their memory and the history of our family, the history of the nation.
Civil War reenacting got me interested in my ancestors and how they fought. And I come to find out that I was with an artillery unit in the past, and it was Marion Light Artillery, and I found out that my great-great-grandfather served with Marion Light Artillery out of Ocala in 1861.
There are two phases to Civil War battles. There's first the actual fighting that occurred in the 1860s, and that's relatively brief. And then there's a second phase of memory in which those battles are commemorated. And that takes a lot longer and is actually still an ongoing process.
Most reenactors seem to be looking for a connection with the past.
On the battleground itself, it takes all that off the pages of a history book, and you actually see the people, and it makes you realize that it wasn't just history. These were people, these were men, women fighting for their beliefs, fighting for their homes. It just brings it to you in a profound way when you're out here and you realize you are on hallowed ground.
So another important thing about memory is the idea that it allows non-combatants the ability to connect with what happened here at Olustee. Some of that is through reenactment, some of that is through visitors, but what's important about memory is the way in which people from all walks of life come to Olustee and feel that connection.
Many monuments around Florida honor Confederate dead. Most were erected in the late 1800s and early 1900s by the United Daughters of the Confederacy. Olustee's Battleground Historic State Park is home to no less than 3 monuments, the first dedicated in 1912 by the UDC.
One of the interesting things about the inscriptions on these monuments is that they, again, really reflect the sensibilities of late 19th century and early 20th century white Southerners. So, for example, what you'll often see are things about the defense of the home and hearth and the fact that their lives were not sacrificed in vain. Those are two really important themes for what we call the lost cause mythology, the idea that the South was fighting this battle to preserve a way of life that was threatened by the Union and that they were in fact being invaded by Union forces. Of course, African Americans would remember this in very different ways, really as a more kind of revolutionary struggle than an invasion. But that's part of the idea of conflicted memory, and that's why historians are so fascinated by the way in which we commemorate things like the Battle of Olustee.
The Union sustained nearly 2,000 casualties in the Battle of Olustee, but it wasn't until the 1960s that a monument to Union dead was placed in an adjacent private cemetery. In 2013, the Florida Park System heard a proposal to place a Union monument on the grounds of the Olustee Battlefield State Park. After acrimonious debate, the measure remains in limbo, with bitter feelings on both sides.
What makes people so passionate about the American Civil War? Why do they want to commemorate it? And why are they so deeply divided about how to commemorate it? I think that in part it's a genuine passion for history, but it's also because the Civil War allows us to revisit some of these big, enduring questions that are still with us today and still dominate American politics. Questions like, for example, how to deal with race relations. Questions about the appropriate role of the federal government. Questions about whether or not the United States is a collection of semi-independent states or a unified nation. Those are actually some pretty enduring questions that every generation of Americans deals with. And so the Civil War allows us to take one particular historical aspect of those kinds of questions, questions about race, questions about government, questions about national identity. And it allows us to explore them in a way that's very different from the way that we explore them today, but nonetheless they're influenced very much by our political opinions of today.
I think we should all remember it just because of the way these men were, the personal relationships they had with each other, and how they fought for each other and against each other, and how significant that was at the time, and we should learn from that, being that we're 150 years out and we still make some of the same mistakes that they did.